get started talking.
Okay, before you start, after we finish with the series, do you have the book Wonder?
I do have the book Wonder.
We should read that. But, um, are you able to delete, aren't you able to, like, delete ARs so you can retake them for certain books?
I think so. I'm not sure how to, but I know like you can. I would just have to figure out how. But yeah.
Okay, because I really want to read Wonder again. We did it last year, and even though we read it last year, it would still be giving us points again this year.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to get started. So remember, the four of them just made it to the island. Remember, the captain died. He drowned. Mr. Radford rolled out and left them. All six of them are on the boat. And then, fire. And then two of them are lost. Remember, what's her face is lost. Of course, I can't think of her name. Liza is lost, and so is JJ. The other four at the end of the last book made it to the island on that raft thing. But remember, Will is like unconscious still. He's like still not moving. So the first thing is a prologue, and this is basically a foreword. So this would be like if you picked up the book without reading the first one. So I'm still going to read it to us just to refresh your memory of where we're at, okay? So this is basically a foreword. It's also called a prologue, okay? So, prologue, page 1. On the beach of a small coral island with no name sat all that was left of the schooner Phoenix. It was a tiny wooden raft, 6 feet long and not quite 4 feet wide, and had once been the roof over the proud ship's galley. Now it was scorched by fire, battered by weather, and encrusted with sand and sea salt. Barely visible through the battle scars were 3 letters, NIX, the rest of the Phoenix's name, along with the ship herself, lay at the bottom of the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. On this piece of float stamp, 4 young people had braved 7 days and nights at the mercy of the sea. Their captain was gone, drowned. The mate had deserted them, leaving them to die. 2 of the companions were lost without a trace. Close to death from hunger, thirst, and the blazing sun, the 4 survivors had ridden the wind and waves. 3 of them were in desperate condition. The 4th, deeply unconscious, when they washed ashore on this rugged cay, 6,000 miles west of Los Angeles, 400 miles south of Tokyo, and 900 miles east of Hong Kong. It was a tiny dot in the vast ocean, a dot that appeared on no maps, overlooked no shipping lanes, and was observed by no passing aircraft, an island with no name. So, they are 6,000 miles from the United States. They're 1,100, which is 1,100 from Tokyo, and then 900 from Hong Kong. So there's no way that you could travel that on a little raft. And they're saying this island does not even have a name. That's how small it is. So the odds of there being other people on this island are probably slim to none. So that just gave us a little background, just, to refresh your brain where they're at. Nolan, what's up?
I think they're gonna find a Radford on that island.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never read the book. That's a good guess. So
he should be ashamed for leaving those kids.
Yeah.
They did nothing
so remember in our last book, it said the day of the week is what it said. It said, like July 14th or whatever. Instead of having the day of the week, now it just says day 1. So this is going to be day 1 on the island. And remember, they made it 7 days on that little raft. So 7 days they went like without water, so they've been 7 days without food, plus like 7 days in scorching sunlight. So they are all beaten up. They're all lucky to be alive. So we are on chapter 1, day 1. It is 4:45 p.m. So it's 4 in the evening, okay? They had survived 40-foot waves, an explosive and an explosion and fire at sea, and a week adrift on a tiny raft. But now Luke Haggerty, Charles Swan, and Ian, I forgot how to say his last name, Sarakati, face their greatest challenge so far. Okay, so what the freak is this challenge? They survived 40-foot waves and an explosion. A coconut. It had fallen off a tall palm, missing Luke's ear by an inch. To 3 people who had put nothing but rainwater in their stomachs for 7 long days, it represented what they needed most. Food. Charla, the city kid, turned it over in her hand. Where's the opener on this thing? What do you expect? Luke shot back. A pull tab? Coconuts are very hard, so I don't know how to open one. It was a joke, but it underscored the tension and the fear in the group. Will Greenfield, the fourth survivor, lay unconscious and unmoving on the beach not far away. He needed medical attention. Probably they all did. But they were far from any doctor or hospital, stranded on a what? It had to be an island, but how big is the island and where? It was anybody's guess. So remember, they don't know what island they're on. It's not like they showed up and it was like, welcome to the island of blah, blah, blah. It's just literally an unknown island. What's up, Nolan?
When my uncle lived in Florida, he used to open up coconuts with a machete. Like, he would find them off the trees and stuff.
All right, but none of them have a machete. But that would totally work because it's a big blade.
You don't see any rocks, maybe crack them open.
Well, maybe that's what they're going to do. It's just right now they're all like, okay, how do we open this freaking coconut? We're starving. Because coconut, it has like coconut water or coconut milk, whatever you want to call it, inside of it. But then also you can eat the inside of the coconut. There's like meat. The coconut meat is really, it's a fruit. But you can also eat the inside of the coconut. So if they were able to open it, if they can, then they'll have food. So be grateful, Luke reminded himself. You're alive. But he was not grateful. Captain Cascaden wasn't alive. Lisa Greenfield and J.J. Lane weren't alive. Luke felt their absence in his every breath, an overwhelming sadness that weighed on him as heavy as exhaustion and dehydration. What was so special about Luke that he had deserved to live and the others had perished? Why was he still here? Good luck? Or maybe the luck wasn't so good after all. The hunger felt more powerful than death. Forget hunger pains. Luke hadn't felt those in days. Instead, there was a grinding, hollow emptiness where his stomach should have been. The sensation was so intense that it seemed to go outside the limits of his skin. With it came a nervous, trembling weakness that was only going to get worse. And here was this coconut. You have to break it, explained Luke, banging it on the damp ground. You have to get through the tough skin. He scratched up a rock and began bashing it against the greenish shell. It takes patience. He picked it up and hurled it at the tree. Open, you miserable rotten! It bounced off with a thwack and hit the ground unbroken. Ian spoke up. I once saw on a documentary about native tribes who cracked coconuts with their bare hands. Did you bother to find out how they did it? Luke asked irritably. Ian shook his head. That was part 2. They showed it in the night I left for this trip. The three exchanged a stricken look. It was hard to believe that barely 2 weeks ago they had been safe at home, packing for charting a new course. A month-long boat excursion meant to help troubled youth. Charla sounded slightly hysterical. It's like starving to death at Thanksgiving dinner, she cried. She picked up the fallen coconut, spun it around, and hurled it like a discus into the jungle. Crack. It broke, Ian exclaimed. I heard it. They rushed into the dense trees, but their coconut was nowhere to be seen. Vines and underbushes scratched at their legs. Luke grabbed a branch and began hacking away at the tangle. The coconut! The food! It had to be down here somewhere. He began to flail wildly, like a crazed golfer knee-deep in rough. He roared in anger. It was stupid. He knew, a waste of valuable energy when there was so little left, but his frustration mixed with his hunger, he didn't care. He couldn't help himself. Luke! Charla grabbed him from behind. Stop it. It's only a coconut. Guys, came Leon's excited voice. Over here! They followed his call to the small grove of a leafy tropical tree and shrubs. There, the younger boy was gathering an armload of green fruit that had fallen to the ground. Charla wrinkled her nose. What stinks? These are durains? Ian exclaimed breathlessly. They have a strong odor, but they're food. He broke one open against a tree trunk and handed it to Luke. The powerful smell tripled. Luke stared at it. You're kidding, right? The thick skin was covered in spikes. It looked more like a deadly weapon than a fruit. Charla accepted a piece, handling it as if it might explode. But how do we know it isn't poison? Luke plucked out a giant seed and began to eat the grayish mush around it. There was this documentary on TV, he began, mouthful. Luke and Charla locked eyes. They had learned from experience that Ian was never wrong about something he'd seen on television. His stockpile of knowledge had saved their lives more than once on the raft. They fell on the offering like starving sharks. It wasn't good, Luke reflected. It wasn't even acceptable, but in his ferocious hunger, he barely noticed, gorging himself on fruit, the consistency of gritty pudding and with the odd garlicky flavor. Back home, he wouldn't have given this stuff table room, but he ate greedily, even crunching the rock-hard seeds because Ian said they needed the protein. The feast soon turned into a frenzy. After no food for so long, once they started eating, they couldn't stop themselves. The three stumbled around the grove in a fever of appetite, tripping and falling over the dozens of discarded rinds, even as they rushed to break open new fruit. The rough scratched their knees and shins, yet none of them felt the sting. Nothing mattered. Nothing but the breathless race to get to the outside as much nutrition as humanly possible. Okay, so they're literally eating as much of this gross fruit as they can find. Like, it's gross, and they're just eating and eating and eating and eating. As he stuffed himself, at long last, Luke could feel his stomach again, back where it belonged and comfortably full. The sensation came along with something unexpected, sudden, overpowering sleepiness. All at once, his eyelids were so heavy he couldn't keep from closing. Drowsy panic. Had they just poisoned themselves? The others must have experienced this too. Just before he lost consciousness, he heard Charles say, "God, what did we eat? I can't stay awake." Seconds later, the three of them lay motionless, the remnants of their feast still scattered around them. So they just ate all this food, and now they're literally so tired, they're just falling asleep. Like, boop, falling asleep. Chapter 2, Day 1, 10:50 p.m. So it's been like a little less than 6 hours. Locker inspection. It flashed before Luke's eyes in a series of still pictures. The assistant principal flipping through his untidy collections of books and sneakers. A pause to wave those sweaty gym shorts to everybody in the hall. The guy was a real comedian. And then a small, hard shape in his wadded up back pocket, stubby fingers drawing it out. A .32 caliber pistol. It's not mine, Mr. Sazzo. Even now, lying unconscious in the jungle of a deserted island 9,000 miles away, Luke protested his innocence. Somebody framed me. And just like it happened in real time, he was not believed. The rush began. The trial, the choice, 6 months in Williamson Juvenile Detention Facility, or a program called CNN, charting a new course, 4 weeks of sailing aboard the Phoenix, a majestic schooner. Then he would learn discipline, cooperation, and respect for law and order. The images changed. He could hear the tremendous explosion, feel the hot wind, the blast of his face, see the approaching wall of fire. Something shuffled. It wasn't an explosion. Luke awoke with a start. It was so dark that for an instant, he thought he was back on the raft. The silver of the moon provided only light. Okay, so he was just dreaming about, being caught with the gun and, whatever else. So he was just dreaming while he was asleep for these 6 hours. Then he saw the creature. It was just a few inches away, staring back at him, glowing red eyes. Luke gasped in shock and revelation. Instinct told him to back up. But flat on the ground, he had nowhere to go. The beast retreated a couple of steps, snorting and puffing. It was 4 feet long, seemingly all head and bull neck, with a body that tapered with short legs and a tail. On either side of the flat snout curled small, gleaming white tusks that gave an animal the appearance of sporting a well-groomed mustache. A boar, Luke thought. A wild boar, and he was lying here helpless. So a wild boar is kind of like a really, really mean pig. Is like how I would describe it. Nolan?
A boar is like a pig, but with horns.
Yeah, so it's like
Kind
a
of like an elephant.
Yeah, it's just going to be like this weird mean thing. And right now, it's the middle of the night. He can't see anywhere. It's super dark. And he's on the ground. Yeah.
The best way to kill a boar is to pull off its tusk. It will die instantly.
Right on. All in one motion, he rolled away and scrambled to his knees. The boar startled and thundered into the jungle, its massive head pumping up and down like a piston on it as it ran. Luke squinted around the clearing, making out the shapes of his two companions still lying there asleep. At least he hoped they were asleep. He stood up and felt a paralyzing cramp grind his stomach. He doubled over and tried not to panic. If it were poison, you'd already be dead, he told himself out loud. They had eaten some very weird stuff, too much, too fast, after a week of no food at all. That had to be the shock to their system, and Luke's stomach was letting him know it. An itch on his cheek took his attention from his digestion. He reached up and scratched. Bumps. At least a dozen bug bites all over his face. His eyelids were starting to swell. There were welts on his arms too, and the bare part of his legs below his ragged shorts. On his head even, beneath his thick brown hair. While he'd been sleeping, he had provided a banquet for a local island insect. He heard the buzzing in his ears. He flailed his arms, but the sound didn't go away. Charla stirring and immediately curled into a ball. Oh, my stomach. What was in that fruit? Cyanide? I think we just overdid it, Luke groaned. She was unconvinced. Are you sure? I'm breaking out in a rash. I itched all over. Bugs, Luke explained, slapping and swatting. All at once, a thought came to him that made him forget insects and stomach cramps. Will, he exclaimed in horror. Ian sat upright. He's awake? We just left him there on the beach. Well, began Charla, working hard to sound calm. It's not like he was going anywhere. Remember, Will's unconscious. They just kind of let him hang out. So, I saw a wild boar tonight, Luke said breathlessly. It didn't hurt me, but Will can't defend himself. We've got to go back there. They ran through the dense brush, stumbling with heavy legs over the spaghetti of vines. Luke tried to will his feet to step higher, but he couldn't seem to summon the energy. Hold it. Charla grabbed him by the arm and stopped him. Do you remember how to find the beach? I don't. The three looked around, struggling to sharpen senses that were dulled by fatigue and discomfort. In the darkness, all directions seemed equally impossible. I can't see it, Luke said finally. I can barely see you guys. Be quiet, ordered Ian. Now what do you hear? I hear mosquitoes, and lots of them, moaned Charla. Let's get out of here. Listen to the silence, Ian insisted. This time, Luke fought the impulse to run from the insects that were devouring him. Instead, he forced himself to open his ears and mind. There was a buzzing, sure. Against a backdrop of nothing, it seemed so loud as a squadron of planes. But slowly, he became aware of others, quieter sounds, the scurrying of small nocturnal birds and animals, the rustle of wind and palm fronds, and over it all, a distant rhythmic pounding. His brain was working in slow motion, so there was a delayed reaction. The surf, he explained finally. Ian pointed this way. So they had to be quiet so they could hear the ocean, okay? They have no idea how to find the beach, so they had to be really, really quiet, really, really still and think, okay, where the heck are we going? But they finally heard what way the beach was. A few minutes later, they broke out of the trees. Running had served to clear their heads a little. Luke offered up a high five that Charla took a weak slap at. The celebration was short-lived. An identification in the soft sand showed the spot where Will had been lying. Their friend was nowhere to be seen. Great. So, what happened to Will? Did he get drowned back into the surf? Did an animal get him? Or did he magically wake up? Nolan.
He probably floated away to Narnia.
Yeah, like, the tides of beaches, like if it came up too high, like maybe it took him. I don't know. We're going to read one more chapter today.
The thing about tides is that when they come back up, I'm pretty sure every time it goes back up, it goes up a small bit, and then when the second wave comes in, it goes up even higher and higher.
Like it continues to go higher and higher until it doesn't get higher at all, and then it just like works its way back down. So
then maybe he floated away, I would think.
Yeah, I got no idea. So we're going to find out what happened to Will, hopefully. We are on Chapter 3, Day 1, 10:35 p.m. When Will Greensfield finally regained consciousness, it was sudden with a start. One moment he was in a four-way, dreamless place, and the next he was sitting up, awake and alert. Weird even. Where am I? His voice was hoarse, scratchy. Man, he was thirsty. Hungry, too. And what a headache. It was pitch dark, but he could feel the sand beneath him and hear the ocean. What was going on? Had he fallen asleep at the beach? He tried to think. but he couldn't focus on anything past the pounding in his head and the restless gnawing in his stomach. His brain was in a fog. He almost saw it, waves of silvery gray mist. But mist couldn't be visible in blackness. Think, he ordered himself. The last thing he remembered, he had been on a plane bound for Guam and charting a new course. His sister Liza got the extra peanuts and, big surprise, refused to share. Peanuts. He could sure use some peanuts now. Forget the peanuts. Think! Guam. This must be Guam. But what happened to charting a new course? Where's Liza? His freckled feature formed a nervous frown. His parents had sent him and his sister halfway around the world for CNC. The trip was supposed to teach them how to get along. It was a huge deal to Mom and Dad. Big money, too. If he had missed it, they'd never forgive him. Liza was already their little darling. That would only get worse if everybody was mad at him. He felt white-hot rage. Liza did this. She set him up so he would miss the trip. Only, why couldn't he remember her doing it? Why couldn't he remember how he got here at all? He stood up, muscles very stiff. How long had he been sleeping? Wait a minute. These weren't the clothes he was wearing on the plane. He was clad only in shorts and a t-shirt, both absolutely ruined. Oh, Liza was going to pay for this one. He began to explore the beach. Slowly, his feet were unsteady. He felt as if he might overbalance and fall flat on his face at any moment. Okay, so right now, Will's awake, but he remembers nothing. He's just like, why am I on a beach alone? He just literally remembers nothing. There was just enough light for him to make out the ocean on one side and a jungle of palm trees on the other. What he couldn't make out was anything else. No people, no buildings, nothing. Guam wasn't exactly New York City, but it was a place with towns, an airport, a marine where the Phoenix CNC boat was supposed to be parked. Not parked, he reminded himself, moored. He stopped in his tracks. How would he have known something like that? He was totally clueless when it came to sailing. Liza, came a voice from the distance. No, the voice was male. Will, where are you? Now that was definitely a girl. Liza, he broke into a sprint. Liza, I don't know what kind of joke you think this is. He pulled up short. 2 boys and a girl were running across the beach, staring at him as if he'd just come back from the dead. Liza was nowhere to be seen. Who are you? Demanded Will. Where's my sister? They froze, eyes widening. The first boy, the leader, took a cautious step forward. Will, it's me, Luke, and Charla and Ian. Will squinted at the strangers. Should he know these people? They seem to know him. Listen, I think I'm lost. I'm looking for the boat called Phoenix. Know it? The 3 exchanged an uneasy glance. The Phoenix sank, Will, said Luke. We were all on it. What are you talking about? Will stormed. I've never been on a boat in my life. Where's Liza? She didn't make it, Charla said gently. The 4 of us managed to get on the raft, but we never found Liza or JJ. I don't know any JJ. I don't know you. Where's my sister? Will, think, urged Luke. You have to remember, we were all together on the CNC trip. There was a storm, then an explosion. We're lucky to be alive. Listen, Will said impatiently. You've got the wrong guy. My boat trip hasn't started. I don't know anything about a shipwreck. Charla tried to reason. Please, Will, try to remember. We were shipwrecked together. How else could we get on this island? You mean Guam? Will was exasperated. I flew here with my sister. This isn't Guam, Luke said soberly. We don't know where we are. That's your problem. He looked past them in gloom. Liza! It must be amnesia, Ian said in a low voice. You're crazy, exclaimed Will. No, really, Charla pleaded. You were so sick on the raft, you were unconscious for days. That's a lie. What have you done with my sister? Luke stepped forward and put a comforting hand on Will's shoulder. Wild in panic, Will shook him off and staggered back. Will, don't! Charla cried. We can help you! Like a hunted animal, Will stared from face to face. They were lying. All 3 of them. They were trying to trick him into what? He had no way of knowing. He was lost. So lost. But whatever was going on, these 3 were mixed up in it somehow. He was in trouble. And who knew what had happened to Liza? Animal instinct took over. With a cry, he wheeled on the stand and sprinted down the beach. He stole a quick glance over his shoulder. They were gaining on him. The girl ran like a cheetah. Leave me alone, he yelled. Desperately, he made a right turn and disappeared into the jungle. Charla was hot on his heels. No, cried Ian. If we get lost in there, we won't ever find one another. Charla stopped just inside the trees. We can't just leave him. We can't help him if we're worse off than he is, Luke argued. We've got to stay cool. But she began to cry. It starts bad and just gets worse and worse. Losing the captain was terrible enough. I keep seeing it in my sleep. Then Liza and JJ and now Will. We haven't lost him, soothed Luke. Maybe the bugs will drive him out here. They did it to us. And maybe they won't, she sobbed. He could trip and break a leg. He could fall unconscious again. There are wild boars out there. They're not hunters, Ian put in. The Discovery Channel did show them on once. They can be nasty, but they won't hunt a fellow animal for food. Charla was bitter. Will's not an animal. He's our friend. In the jungle, we're all animals, Ian said seriously. We have to hunt and forage to survive. Okay. So Will clearly has some type of amnesia where he can't remember anything. So poor him, he's ran off into the woods, but it's so dark. They're like, we can't go after him because we'll get lost ourselves. So then what are we going to do? Luke eased himself down into the soft sand. A wild pig means only one thing to me, he said, rubbing his stomach, bacon. Charla sat beside him. We can't even open a coconut. You expect to track a boar, kill it, skin it, and cook it? We don't even have a fire. That should be job one, Ian said positively. A big bonfire would signal ships and planes that were here. Then we could get Will to a doctor. Charla looked out into the great blackness of the sea. Do you really think we have a chance of being rescued from this place? Will considered the problem. The whole CNC thing is about isolation. They start you in Guam, which is nowhere, and they take you out to nowhere squared. And this, he gazed around the beach. This has to be even farther than that. But they'll definitely look for us, Ian argued. I mean, they send in half an army when some balloonist or mountain climber gets lost. They'll search for us when we don't show back up in Guam. Searching and finding are two different things, Luke pointed out. In case you haven't noticed, it's a really big ocean with thousands of islands that look exactly like this one. Who knows how long it could take to track us down. So that's true. When people know boats and planes are missing, obviously there's big search things going off. But remember, the trip was supposed to be a certain amount of time, so no one knows yet that the CNC Phoenix boat is missing. So that's just something to remember. No one knows the boat's missing yet. Months, Charla predicted mournfully. Years, maybe never. Her words seemed to hang there for a long time, unscored by the steady pounding of the ocean. It was Ian who finally broke the gloomy silence. It's not impossible, you know. There are thousands of stories of survival in places like this. Maybe so, Luke said grimly, but I'll bet there were even more that didn't get told because the people were never rescued. Remember, the Discovery Channel can't interview you when you're banished off the face of the earth. We are going to stop there today. Join me tomorrow and we'll read some more. Be sure to get your vocabulary homework done. And if you have any other homework, thank you for joining me. You guys are all free to go. You have no more lives today.